Howdy. Do it look alright? I'm sitting in the Homeland Heritage Park at a picnic pavilion. There's 4 picnic tables in here and a storage shed. Behind me is the Homeland School. It's the oldest surviving school building in the county. It was built in 1878 and was in use as a school until 1956. And this is where I started first grade, in that school. Here in Homeland, I have a lot of memories. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a number of videos involving Homeland and memories of Homeland. I thought of another incident that happened when we lived out east of town in the farming community, in the middle of the pasture, or in the pasture, not the middle. But we had an enameled steel china cabinet. It was about 5 feet tall, and my mother kept something in a container that she kept on top of that china cabinet. And for whatever reason, my brother and I had decided that that was some kind of treasure or something, that we needed to figure out what was in there. It was a china cabinet, so there were a lot of shelves in it with a lot of dishes in it. But we decided we could open the doors and climb the shelves to reach the top and see what that treasure was on top of the cabinet. And we started. We got about halfway up, both of us climbing on it at the same time, and it fell over on top of us. All the dishes broke. There were shards of dishes all over the place, a bunch of sharp points, sharp edges. We had little cuts all over us. My mother was fit to be tied. Probably all of her dishes were broken, including glasses. And there we were with cuts all over us. She put band-aids all on the biggest, most severe. None of them were really too severe. We didn't have a whole lot of injury with it, just a bunch of little scratches. And I think they had to go to town and get more band-aids to get the major ones covered up. The rest of them they just let go, because like I say, they weren't that severe. But we never did find out what the treasure was on top. That came to me yesterday evening. But from that little 2-bedroom house in the pasture, we moved to Homeland. And the place where we lived was mined up many years ago, and since been reclaimed. But we spent a lot of time here in Homeland. It's a nice sized little village, I guess you would say. Very small town. Maybe 1,500, 2,000 inhabitants altogether. Had a post office, a general dry goods store, not a general store, dry goods store, and a grocery with a meat market. And we traded there often. On Saturdays, we would go to Fort Meade for things that weren't available here in Homeland. But for the run-of-the-mill items that you suddenly had a need for, it was within easy walking distance, probably maybe mile or so, mile and a half from our house to the Ferdinand's Market. And when I got older, Mom would give me some money and send me to get whatever it was she needed. Of course, she would send Norman as well, or my sister, whoever was handy. But once, as I say, when I got big enough, I could go too. But it being small and not a lot of traffic, there very little through traffic. We wandered the streets. There were a lot of kids, our age kids, with the elementary school here. There was a good supply of students. And I think they taught 1st through 6th here. And when I started, it was the classes were in just 2 rooms. I think 5th and 6th grade were in 1 room, and 1st through 4th were in another room. And they taught us in time segments. I was learning the 1st grade stuff, but I was over here in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th grade stuff. So I had a pretty well-rounded education, I guess, from that. I started there, and about halfway through the school year, we moved back to Fort Meade, so I didn't finish 1st grade there. And the Fort Meade Elementary School was quite a bit different than the little wooden 2-room schoolhouse in Homeland. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The earlier years, I'm trying to think. My brother started school when we lived out there in the country east of town. He's a year and 4 months older than I am. So I guess I was 4 and a half, close to 5, when we moved here to Homeland. But I had some relatives lived here, had some cousins, visited with them a lot. And there were, we played with kids all around, all through the neighborhood, visited different houses. There wasn't a park here at that time. We just made up games, played in the little copses of woods that were scattered throughout the home. Kids, anywhere from my age on up to 10 or 11, all played together. And at any given day, there'd be 6 or 8 of us on some kind of imaginary adventure. The house we lived in, I think I mentioned earlier, was a shotgun house, which it means there was a hallway that went from the front door all the way through to the back door. The old saying was you could fire a shotgun through the front door, go out the back door, and never hit a thing unless somebody was standing in the hall. The bedrooms are all on one side, and then the living room, dining room, and kitchen were on the other side. There was a back porch that opened off of the back door, and there was a kitchen door that opened onto the back porch as well. There was a counter built onto the back porch that had a sink in it and a pitcher pump, and that's where we got our water, was from that hand pump, pitcher pump from a shallow well. and that's where my mom washed dishes. I think before she hand washed some clothes too. I don't know if we had a washing machine then or not. I know when we moved back to Fort Meade, we had a washing machine at some point there, but I don't know if we got it when we were living in home. But at any rate, we had chickens. We had a big garden. My dad raised a very large garden. We, of course, when the crops would come in, we ate out of it. We also had an abundance that my folks would put up in mason jars. So we'd have vegetables all the way into the winter. And on the other side of the house, it'd be the east side of the house, that was where the chicken coop was, in the southeast corner. And then from the chicken coop about halfway out to the road were 2 rows of rabbit pens. My dad also raised rabbits, and that was a source of income for the family. He'd raise them up to fryer size and butcher them and sell them. He'd sell them to some people here in Homeland. He'd also sell them in Fort Meade. And we ate a lot of rabbit as well. It was a food source for us, as well as the chickens. When the chickens got too old to lay, or if we got too many, we'd have fried chicken, or if it was an older chicken, we had chicken and dumplings. The older chickens were a little tough when you fried them, but if we had an abundance, we could have fried chicken from a young pullet, and that was good. But the area on the west side, where the living room and the kitchen were, they were separated by a wall and a common fireplace. There was a 2-sided fireplace on that side of the house. It opened into the living room, and it also opened into the kitchen. So that whole side of the house stayed nice and warm. During the winter, got bedtime, Dad would bank the fire down so there wouldn't be any real fire danger. And then he was always the first one up, and he'd stoke it up, get a nice roaring fire going in the cold of the morning. And when we got out of bed, we would grab up our clothes and run across the living room, across the hallway into the living room to get dressed by the fire. When we first moved there, my mom was cooking on a wood stove. The kitchen had a wood stove in it. And I remember watching her move the eyes around on the top of the stove and getting the fire set right so that the smoke would go out the flue instead of smoking up the kitchen. That was interesting to watch her do. And she baked biscuits in the oven, baked cakes in the oven too. But we ate good out of the garden and the chicken and the rabbits. I didn't know we were poor. I thought we were pretty well off. On the east side of the rabbit pens, that was the end of our yard. There was an orange grove between our house and the landlord's house, and they were just off of 4th Street. And the orange grove went behind our house, and on past the garden to the road. The road had a turn south at the corner of our garden. The road turned south, and the orange grove behind the garden went all the way to that road. So we had had oranges to eat too. The landlord didn't mind if we ate oranges. And we played all kind of games in the grove. We had all kind of imaginary places and circumstances we'd come up with there. It was a lot of fun. This one's running on, so I should probably save more for the next one. But for this one, that'll do.